Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, okay. I run down all the roads. The trees are just darker now for fall, with the leaves luminescent. Syrah mobiles of honey and rum nodding at me as I run down the road ahead of you, not sweating yet, not breathing heavy yet. I am chasing everything coming next. Flowers on the table. Our table? Your mother seems skeptical and your father nonetheless charmed. I'm good with parents, all the parents. Will we be dinner party people? I eat standing up. Will you want to sit away from the TV? With napkins and plates and not with our hands, will you start seeking out recipes? Put cutouts from food and wine on the fridge and learn to use a mandolin. Can you learn too to rise early as I do? I'm not optimistic. You snooze. You snooze several times. Pull me back. But I need the sight of the trees in this half light. You didn't believe I would get up in the dark. I never do. You'll be asleep for hours. You were dreaming restlessly, coughing, and turning in your sleep. Are you allergic to the sheets? Are you allergic to anything? The goldenrod in a riot at the fence. Will we be observing cocktail hour? You must have specific expectations. I go into every, maybe this time, already ahead of the story, which is real or not real, is as real as the fog now blurring the view ahead. But you must still see me. I'm just a few yards past. If you were beside me, were you to trace your fingers along the side of my face, your nails would come away dry, but soon, so soon, my hairline will be slick, and were you to push the hand against my chest, you would feel a heart out of room, but I keep going. Past the oaks, through the vines, can I live through this? Can I circle back? Unhooked from facts, I run faster, you snore, I leap over that, I run down the future, I am so fast. I chase, would you want to? I pant, I cannot be caught, I am not being chased, it will never be as good as this. Silence, eating alone. You don't have to clap after each one. I mean, it's okay. August Song of Flight. Sorry, so many of my poems are seasons, so I'm just really living in. We're giving up the warmth now. August Song of Flight. You unshuckable masterpiece of conviction and collapse, I shiver in the light of your particular eclipse. You have a way of pickling my tongue and rubbing out all my best learned lessons. Now is when I walk away. Now is when I knit my lips together and keep myself clothed. Oh, but the plummy sucker of your mouth and the fractured shadow of your breath, raking hesitation from my limbs. Here is how I ruin in a field and flatten the corn stalks. Madman, you call the full force of my attention into your palms that follow the swing of my jaw. I am a foolish animal. I should burn for this. I do for mischief and skin and the sight of the night's bruised submission to morning. How much of what I lie down with do I take with me when I rise? Nobody can resist it, right? It like keeps a rhythm to things. Someone right before the reading mentioned Henry James. So I'm gonna read this, which I never read out loud. So we'll see how that goes. This is for a former mentor of mine named James Longenbach, who was an incredible poet and passed away last summer, and was a great loss to our community. An incredible poet and a master technician of craft. In praise of. We're discussing syntax in Wharton and James, and my mentor is dropping the word pleasure like quarters into a parking meter. Is saying pleasure with this casual satisfaction, this deft ease that I associate with him. And so yes, I am listening, but I am also having difficulty smoothing the rhythm in my wrists and chest, feeling as though I should be turning around to fend off the starched Puritans ever at my back, ever ready to guard against the stealth attacks on what they believe to be their rightful territory, namely everything, namely the full reach of my mind and all that it may draw itself toward. The word pleasure, flitting around like so many loose dandelion fronds after one blows the head off a weed with a wish, no more remarkable than finding a warm 20 in the pocket of a pair of jeans after you've pulled them from the dryer. Pleasure. The word offers then a particular illicit trill of sensation, suggests to memory the most fat-tongued of feelings, the grass licking your ankles as you skirt the high reeds, making your way easy, slow, toward the water after months spent cramped, sweating in boots, warm bread, butter melting on it, reading D.H. Lawrence's fruit poems and marveling, blushing, yes, admit it, that a thicket of words could produce such, but then pleasure is reserved for that which brings satisfaction, not glee or rapture, but that which first makes your mouth open and round and encourages the skin around your mouth to pull back and lift up your ears, the infinitely small moments before you bare your teeth and smile, the aromatic sheen of gin on the olive at the bottom of an empty drink, the salt and perfume, an indehiscent bite, a lovely final coda to the time you spent slowly taking one swallow after another, savoring each word. So, thanks. Just trying to be respectful and keep time. So I think two more, and then I'll shift to something new. Fantasy of loving the fantasy. My tongue fingers the pit of the olive at the bottom of the third martini. I am folding his laundry like I like it, and I almost do, this well-worn gesture, newly applied, playing house, I almost love it. The clamor and mess he makes for dinner, how he dirties every pot and lid, how often I have practiced for this domestic position. My posture nearly perfect, my concerns inscrutable. My sharp-toothed self, now well petted and settled, no longer stalking the birds, not lingering near the back door, which is not locked. I had a habit once, of accidentally setting things on fire. A bagel that caught in the toaster and swept a fiery lick up the cabinet over the stove. The patio table with a spectacular crater left in it from the citronella torch I tipped askew on my way to the pool. There were too, of course, the multiple times I have left a candle burning, poured oil in the cast iron when it's still too hot. I have a habit of believing myself impenetrable. It was never on purpose, I say, about the fires. I'm just so clumsy. You hear my laugh as I say it. You must know I lingered there in the caustic bluster of them, thought carefully of letting them go. Fantasy of meaning more than I do. He sighed, smiled, to all I ever said, and when we found each other in the parking lot under a July moon, kismet, he said. It led where it always leads, which is yes, then nowhere. The lipstick came next. Suddenly I'm saying heat wave to the women who ask for the name of my new act. They're getting a kick out of this. The ladies who lunch love my bravado, and it's geranium to the yahoos and cherry bomb for the snobs and the tourists who bike in from farther flung, and this one man sneers at cat's tongue. Well, that's happening. They don't know that it takes more muscle to get it off than keep it on. A fat smear of cream rubbed hard into the crevices in the nook where my upper lip binds with the lower, and still a stain accrues. I continue exhaling in shades of rare. You forget the order of things and you'll hear about it. You have to be meticulous. You have to pay attention. Thank you all. delightful and a real girlish fantasy. Sometimes fantasy feels, what do I mean? Sometimes your real life feels like the fantasy and vice versa. So, yes, I'm going to read 3 new things, because why not? This is from whatever the next thing is. Living together. I am most myself alone, pacing the length of our block. It's summer, and I don't wear a bra. Like my mother says, gravity comes for us all, but I like the flop of them in the July night. The street light blinks, the swipe of a wing, a bat or bats above the bulb. They cut into the sweep of light. I watched so much Buffy as a teenager, but the vampires were almost never in bat form. They were just men. Or I only remember the men, mainly, the mope and the sociopath. I would fast forward to the scenes with the latter. I cared nothing for that sad sack professing devotion, but fuck all if I didn't want my hair pulled by the vicious blonde. I try to teach you how to do it right, tell you to rake your hands down and grab from the root, but you just yank the ends and ask me how I like it. It isn't what I asked for. I don't have the same appetite for violence that I used to, don't have the same energy to recover. I want for nothing now, save a little teeth in your kiss, nothing I haven't had before and couldn't handle, not really. I didn't love my face pressed down onto the hood of a car, a couch cushion, or cock, yet I lapped it up with a wet and thankful tongue. I am never bruised from being loved by you. Damn like D-A-M, not like. Water gathers the cattails close. The woman we passed a quarter mile back told us there are 2 beavers swimming, one on either side of the footbridge, she said. It's the time of light when they slip into view. I've been here a decade, never been so patient, too abashed to tell you. Say my hands are cold instead. You nod, but don't reply. One beaver works a reed, the other evades the unfinished wall and new ice. Swims so close I catch my breath with both hands. No sense in pussyfooting around the issue. My most secret self does not enjoy a group project. Bite down, dear one, we still have hours. They always do this at poetry readings, and I too myself wait for this, so last poem. One Way Out. I am not always sure we are in the same relationship. How does he manage such certainty? I knew and liked my life, wore my skin as though it had been mine all along. I went out for drinks with an old friend I had not seen in years, in which time her marriage had come spectacularly undone. It was spooky to hear her describe the decisions she made to get loose. I recognized her wildness. She was full of terror, sure, but amazement too. And I heard the explosion in slow motion, the sensation of rain-slicked cement rising up to wipe my foolish face. I was jealous to hear of my own untested desires imploding in the story of someone else's life. If we are all blessed with a particular gift, then surely mine is an insatiable interest in taking people apart. And if you want to leave, then leave, I scream in every fight. Doing the same thing over and over is a kind of hymn. I sing it softly, mouthful of cut glass.
That was a wonderful reading. Where are you? Where did you go? That was great. One more. Let's do that one more time. example of my teachers, I'm going to read a poem by someone else to begin. It's a poem some of you will know. I think it situates us in this moment. It's simply called Poem. It's by Muriel Rukeyser. I lived in the first century of world wars. Most mornings I would be more or less insane. The newspapers would arrive with their careless stories. The news would pour out of various devices, interrupted by attempts to sell products to the unseen. I would call my friends on other devices. They would be more or less mad for similar reasons. Slowly, I would get to pen and paper, make my poems for others unseen and unborn. In the day, I would be reminded of those men and women, brave, setting up signals across vast distances, considering a nameless way of living, of almost unimagined values. As the lights darkened, as the lights of night brightened, we would try to imagine them, try to find each other, to construct peace, to make love, to reconcile waking with sleeping, ourselves with each other, ourselves with ourselves. We would try by any means to reach the limits of ourselves, to reach beyond ourselves, to let go the means, to wake. I lived in the first century of these wars. And so we are in the second century of these wars. And this is a very fraught time for many of us. And I have to tune out of what Rukeyser calls the careless stories in the press, which seem to look at the world as a scoreboard between two teams. As I posted on social media, people tell me I have to pick a side. I pick the side of the innocents. That's the side, versus maniacs. And that said, I'm a little uneasy with this. I will make you uneasy. So this is your chance to go get an ice cream or something. And I realize that people are already in a mind space which is very vulnerable. But no one's more vulnerable than the children, who are actually the future. And it's just getting closer and closer to me to understand that the apocalyptic futures of the clerics and the politicians are delusions, that the first of the people to come and inhabit the future are already here. They're our kids, in my case, my grandkids. So this is what I'm going to do is read the last section of this book, which is called Mundus et Infams. It's a single poem in various sections. It takes a lot of different turns and moves around the world. It's called Mundus et Infams, and it begins with an epigraph from William Blake. The angel that presided o'er my birth said, little creature, formed of joy and mirth, go, love without the help of anything on earth. 1. After the war. Waves went on rolling across leagues of water. Clouds hit high pressure zones and piled up into new beauties. A woman who lived alone cracked an egg on the rim of a pan. A zygote, many zygotes, became attached precariously to nourishing uterine walls. A petulant dictator on the rise professed his admiration for a spurious book deemed holy to those he planned to kill. In regions newly designated countries by people in countries elsewhere, Resentments seethed. A dozen academic papers sifted evidence for calling a set of symptoms a new disease. In the meantime, and long before I knew myself at all, my life had begun among ghosts who begged to be mourned, or demanded answers, especially the ones who didn't know they had been murdered. Wrong name, faith, country. I lay there, a little red fist, and wailed, but no one saw that they surrounded me, asking for pity or vengeance, or begging forgiveness for crimes against me, maledictions like unexploded ordnance in the neighborhood. People once real, who'd loved their lives and one another, who might not have meant to harm but only warn me. In what first tongue did I compose those poems that calmed them, that bid them be silent so I could sleep? I need that language now. They have returned. They circle, insistent, whispering, same war, same war, same war. 2. Art, a great investment, says Forbes. For sale at auction, wooden Santos from Mexico, hand-painted in colorful uniforms, rough-hewn, nearly identical figurines, swords drawn, holding children's bloody heads, arms, legs, arranged in the Sotheby's brochure around a screaming mother. The massacre of the innocents, artist unknown. A recurrent theme in Western art. Rubens, Bruegel, Poisson, Ghirlandaio. Amid the charred ribs of a school bus in Yemen, a fragment of fuselage. Commercial and Government Entity Code, CAGE, like a return address. Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Burlington, Massachusetts, Falls Church, Virginia. Engineering a better tomorrow. And in the bramble, a ram entangled. Oh, angel of outrage, where are you? For arms, say aerospace. For surveillance, information systems. For bombers, say defense. For taxes, say earnings, say second quarter on track, say 62 billion US dollars. A voice was heard in Ramah, Rachel weeping for her children. A Saudi apologist claimed the Yemeni school was teaching insurrection. King Herod's fear, precisely Herod's fear. In Bruegel's version, blood on the village snow. In Ghirlandaio's, blood on the plaza's stones, imperial architecture in the background. In Poisson's, a sandaled soldier, his foot on a baby's neck, dispassionately sights down on the blade. In the Rubens, it is hard to separate the mothers from their babies. The scene is one great mass of writhing flesh. At the border, the official explained, it is hard to separate the mothers from Mexico, from their babies. Confía en mí, por favor, señor. Déjame llevarla y traerle algo de comer. They are enclosures, the official said. We're uncomfortable with the term cage. They are temporary structures of chain link. A voice was heard in Ramah, Rachel weeping for her children. To comfort them, to warm them, to console them, they have each been given a blanket made of foil. At auction, the Rubens sold for $75 million. And in the bramble, a ram entangled. Oh, angel of outrage, where are you? Rubens, Bruegel, Poisson, Ghirlandaio, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, General Electric. Herod, Franco, Trump, Mohammed bin Salman. Historians are skeptical the massacre took place. Flavius Josephus does not mention it. The Orthodox Church has for millennia held that Herod, as punishment, was eaten alive by worms. 3. Sentinel. I show him, now 3, his birth photo. Asleep, fist under his chin. No, he says, not me, not. 4, hold that pose. In old-time billowing shirt sleeves, baggy woolen pants, and ankle-high black cap toes, grandfather-like. Edison, a picture of Edison, as if he has just heard news from the prophets obviating hope of happiness, of any, ever again. But no, his frown, his anger, his clean-shaven cathode stare is for his adversaries. Who owns the light? Button, a toggle, a dimmer, control and guidance systems, a satellite with solar panels, wings, painting, hyper-realist above Earth's marbled blue curve, figures a lovely emptiness of grace. Artists render and fine print at the bottom. Better, much better than a charred orb, sulfured yellow as a smoker's fingers. 5. Mundus et infans. From what region in the imagination of celibate churchmen do they come, these cherubs, wrists and ankles creased, they are so plump, and much too heavy for their tiny wings. Ideas, not children, that have never matured, impossible, equating helplessness with innocence, wordless amnesia with paradise. So I call bullshit on Paul. When I was a child, I spake as a child, in pain, and asked my questions clearly, in a sweeter voice perhaps, but not less serious than now, when clarity remains at least as hard and honesty much harder. I still play dead to keep in practice, since you never know. This requires a note. This is a poem called Tribute, and it's dedicated to the memory of Patrick McSorley. Patrick McSorley was among the earliest and most powerful voices to speak out against the widespread sexual assault of children by Catholic priests. He'd been assaulted as a 12-year-old boy by the Reverend John J. Gagin, a notorious abuser with hundreds of victims. After a long struggle with addiction, which was likely a consequence of his childhood abuse, he died at age 29. Tribute. This man once, he went down. This time none, not one man, not one pill, not one hope could stop him. Not one cry, not one hand could reach him. Not one lie could save him. He went down. This man lived where men fear what they know, and knew what he knew and told the truth. Not one bond could turn him, not one friend could soothe him. He went down. We mourn him. Progress. Iphigenia, Isaac, kids, bugs on the windshield ever since. Story, explanation, lowdown, narrative, narration, citation, recital, report, take, version, rundown, score, apologue, allegory, metaphor, myth, parable, fable, discourse, propaganda, treatise, testament, epic, justification, rationale, excuse. We're sorry, something went wrong. Please try your query again. Fish gotta swim, birds gotta fly, boats gotta sail. Fish, birds, boats, kids, swim, fly, sail, die. At the direction of frowning, serious, disciplined men who grew up with me in America, on their bikes, on roller skates under the horse chestnut trees, trading baseball cards they bought with money from their paper routes. The nightmare true now, nightmare of my Cold War boyhood, true to children elsewhere. And in the bramble a ram entangled. Oh, angel of outrage, where are you? Because everybody needs a job. We are one great mass of writhing flesh. Because fear begets profits, and profits more nifty gadgets. First best gizmo off the line is always an idea, an assumption, a mysterious immaterial twin to every sleek weapon thereafter. Prayer to consecrate the idol. Years of this, generations. Hey, I'm just trying to make a buck. Don't shake us. Make our hearts hammer shame in the face. Now blood drips from public monuments like icicles in spring. We no longer know how to know what we know. Error 404, not found. 8. In the meantime, between the launch and the blast, we drank to our prosperity. The boys are off to prison or to war. The girls carve crosses in their thighs. Sirens, blue lights, shots fired. Even enough is not enough. The server's down. The safety's off. History's a hoarder's burning house. 9. Isaac's dream. Who's there? Who's there? It's dark. I'm afraid I can't see. No one, only an old nightmare. Now I'm falling into nowhere while a body looms above me. Who is it? Who's there? Who's pulling my hair and muttering so angrily? No one, only an old nightmare. A hand on my throat. Air. I garble a choked plea. Who's there? Who's there? I hear moaning somewhere, cry out and wake abruptly. No one, only an old nightmare. Slowly, I see the dream was in fact a memory. And I know who was there. My father, my old nightmare. A dainty dish. Sing a song of violence, its pockets full of lies. 24 children sent sailing off to die. When the boat was sinking, the sharks began to sing. Can we even let ourselves imagine their suffering? The keeper of the lighthouse was counting out his money. Politicians took to TV, said the usual baloney. The maid was in the garden, enraged by what she knows. Along came justice, smirking, thumb at its nose. Winding down. This is the 11th section, and it's in the voice of a child soldier. It's called Enfant Soldat. I used to be always shaking. Some boys cried, but I was a shaking one. The day of the trucks, I wanted to run, but I was shaking and shaking. If I run, 2 boys who did was in the middle of the circle. Never can I ever not be thinking of this now. On the ground, boots on their backs, they are scared on their faces. And the boy who is beside me, they give him the gun. Shoot them boys on the ground dead. Shoot him and him dead, they say. Him and him. The crying boy who could not do it. Never can I ever not be thinking of this now. So the man, he was who drove the truck. Take back the gun and shoot him in the face. Then he is right away dead, quiet. All around the circle then the man is walking, looking in our faces, and I cannot stop shaking. When he make another boy the one, make him to hold the gun. That boy, step to the boys on the ground and shoot their heads. We all climb in the trucks then. And that is how they took us to Mushazi camp for training. 12, seer. In Euripides' Dur version, Artemis, to whom men pray for permission to kill wild creatures of her forests, spirits Iphigenia away to Taurus, where she makes prophecy of the single thing she knows, denied by all who seek her. Children will be sacrificed for advantage, for victory. What she knows is always so. It's almost too easy. Almost. Hardest are the armored men who clatter up her stairs. She knows the harm they will do, and that no words will stop them. And this is the last section, it's a short section, it's a coda. Uvalde, Texas, 5/24/2022. Another, no, not another, not that cushion of a word. Yesterday, with my granddaughter, 3, we lay on our bellies on the warm pavement, watching ants. Look, that one's carrying something. That his dead brother, he bringing him home. Thanks.
Let's give one more round of applause for Richard and John for joining us. And I'd like to invite them both to come on up here and we'll begin the Q&A portion of the evening.
All right, and now it is you, our audience's time to shine. If you have questions for our poets, please just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Yeah, go right ahead.
Do you ever get embarrassed reading the sexy parts?
This is also my first Q&A. Do I get embarrassed? Weirdly, no. I think I've gone through many artistic iterations, and my first was as a performer, and so it's not me reading them, it's somebody else. And if my parents ask, it's all fiction. So that's that.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Ariel.
It's really interesting that you would say that because I was thinking it's very, very bizarre that you two have been paired because it's like your work from what I heard was like super, super intimate and also very good. And your work was very, very external, also very good. But like from what I interpreted, it's just like completely like different kinds of things. But from what you said, it's like you don't feel as if it is you doing the performance, so it's not like you who are issuing the thing, which is you, possibly, to the audience. But like, so, there are so many levels to this. Like, would each of you kind of like be able to sort of like articulate what that process is? You know, like how do you interpret the self? How do you interpret like reading about something else that is not you? How can you get either of those things right? And what does all that mean? That's like a super vague question.
That's a great question. Do you want to take it first? I think one thing that's interesting is Richard and I went to the same MFA program, so it's curious to me that we make very different work, but I believe we were probably like quote unquote trained in similar ways. No.
All
This
the
didn't
stuff
follow.
that they told me not to do.
Well, thanks for blowing up my answer before I got started. That's cool. But I had a teacher when I was in school who was very intent on making sure I understood that art making itself, or writing in this case, is an individuating act. The second I start putting words on a page, it's not me anymore, it's just of me. And I think it stops being me when I start applying tools, like sentence structure and meter and line aren't the way I speak, they aren't the way I move through the world. I maybe think or feel in poetic ways. Like I'm definitely the obnoxious girly who will be looking like, oh my God, like the temperature of the light right now. Like, but that's not interesting in a conversation, and it requires skillful and intentional manipulation to make it something else. So by the time it's here, it feels so far away from my own experience that it carries an emotional truth, but not a narrative truth to a certain extent, if that makes sense.
Well said. Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, this book isn't all like what you heard tonight. That's the third culminating section of the book. There are love poems in the book. There are poems of grief. There's a whole suite of poems that are about grieving my brother. I mean, there's some very personal work in there. And to me, if you're going to write with a certain degree of outrage at what's happening in the world, you have to ground it in what's happening with you. Otherwise, it's bombast, you know. And so I worry, and one of the things that worried me about reading this section tonight is that you get the wrong impression, you know, because you don't see where any of that came from. You know, the commitment to children's well-being can be a sentimental dodge. It is not a sentimental dodge for me, it's been my life. Sort of recovering from childhood trauma and grief and loss is, as James Baldwin said, those are the ways that you connect with everybody else in the world. Otherwise, you bring a shell around yourself and sort of collapse into solipsism and self-pity. And in fact, it can be a very important revolutionary fuel to see the suffering of other people and your connection to it. You know, especially, and here I'm going to get political again, especially growing up in the ahistorical culture of the United States of America. becoming, attempting to become more ahistorical by the minute, we're gonna chase those woke people away because they're trying to tell the truth about us. So, anything that can begin in some way at the heart of your own experience, but then reach through your suffering to other people's suffering, has the potential to ground you in what I said before, in relation to the real future. I was talking to Robin Gamble, the poet over here, a little earlier, and it seems that one way to think about what's going on right now is people with a primary allegiance to the past wreaking violence on people whose primary allegiance is to the future. And the future is embodied in children. They're the actual future. So anyway, so I feel like it's all of a piece. I don't feel like there's political poetry or personal poetry, and it ought to be.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was surprised that you said you never read in praise of out loud because the sounds work so well. I'm just wondering to what extent is sound a concern for you when you write? And then for Richard, when you write the piece you read tonight, when you're trying to link together so many like contemporary and political reference points, or like sound and rhythm, what degree are they in your head when you're writing, revising, or do you try to subjugate them to just like getting specific ideas across? What's that process like?
Yeah, I'm such a sucker for sound. I think this is probably evident in the work itself. I'm sort of a deeply sensorial creature, like living with a lot of my skin exposed, metaphorically and literally, sometimes in the world. That when I was first beginning to sort of study poetry with people who were like leading me through a book and not in high school where they put something down in front of you and go, what's the theme? What's the meaning? And you're just like, oh my God, you've made this so lifeless and awful. What a terrible question. What does this mean? That I had teachers who were sort of like, what are you experiencing as you read this poem? And I remember reading Terrence Hayes' volume Wind in a Box, which is also very sonically driven, in a very different way than like Sylvia Plath's early work is very sonic. And once you stop asking the question, what does a poem mean, and you start saying like, how does it make you feel? What do the words taste like in your mouth? I think you just you unhook yourself from strictly narrative meanings, that the associative value in a poem, suddenly that field becomes a lot wider. So that's very interesting to me, is what does the poem feel like in your body, as opposed to what's that bow at the end that could be in a greeting card, though I'm very much a sucker for that too. Just put a bow on it.
Each of my books has a kind of strategy to it that it's not there when you start, but I mean, as the book starts to take shape, you look for how it works. Like when you go through a car wash, first they get the jets, and then you get the spaghetti mops, and then there has to be some sense of that kind of progress, because the poems are written one at a time, and then they're arranged, right? But in every one of those books, there's a long sequence that recapitulates or goes back to the various strategies of the poems in the book that you've become used to. Some of them are short, some of them are long, some are long lines, some of them are metered and rhymed, some are, and that's picking up things I was doing earlier, addressing maybe very different subject matter earlier in the book. But once I get to that sequence, I want to put all of those things in play, because now I've created a palette, and those are the colors I can use now for the large canvas of this last sequence in the book. And so those are kind of artists' games that you play with yourself in order to get the stuff said. Because otherwise, it's just, you're just bottled up with the feelings and the worry and the outrage or the love and the grief and you have to play some kind of game with yourself to get that, to be able to trick that stuff out. And then what you hope is you've arrived at something that's very like a reenactment of the emotional journey that you were on. So that's, in a way, it is a performance. It's a performance even before you read it to an audience. It's a performance when you're putting it on the page. You're reenacting something in language. It's a kind of translation. And so, when you play games like that, I use the painting analogy, but that's what makes poetry, is that poets use language the way a painter uses paint. Or a sculptor, you're not, it's not a direct communication, it's making something that represents that communication. I hope that made sense.
We do have time for one more question. So starting a little late. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm really interested in this, the whole sort of interior-exterior spectrum, and the two of you, and the reading factor, you sort of represent not the poles, but sort of those tendencies. And we're always in crisis, but I think right now we're in a particular moment of crisis, just like what the hell is going on. And I'm really curious in your writing, in moments like these, for both of you, is your instinct in your writing or thinking about writing, is your instinct to write out into this crisis, or to become more interior, or is it just like, this is unspeakable right now, I'm just gonna wait and let the words come up later? Or am I going to write about something that has nothing to do? Or all of the above. I'm just curious sort of, where you situate yourself in these kind of moments.
I will say that it's funny because I was just saying this to friends too, is the space from which I feel compelled to draft is very different as I've gotten older than when I was younger. When I was younger, I definitely drafted from a sense of urgency, from a sense of, I have something to say. And now life feels cognitively demanding and overwhelming and complex and conflicting in a way that it's difficult for there to be enough space for that sort of associative field to make itself a place that I can exist. And now I often, in terms of the given moment, I'm going to answer this in how I actually write poems now, which is two ways. One, I will myself to, I sit down and give myself an assignment and say, you have these 4 poems, and the piece that's missing is this one, and you are going to write that poem right now. And I just sit there and make that, and so, yes. And sometimes it's terrible, and sometimes it's amazing, and I'm like, wow, you don't need to be motivated at all. And the other way I do it is, there's like this accountability group that I'm part of, and you have to write every day without feedback. You just like send it into the void to a group of people you're assigned to. And I write little snippets based on what's happening or who I am or my responses to things, and at the end of the month I put it all in a Word doc and then start stitching it together. I scrap the month for parts. And that's sometimes, I'm like, oh, I was thinking a lot about that story in the news that month, or I was thinking a lot about the seasons changing that month. I think now I have to train myself, what am I actually thinking about? Because the ambient noise of the world feels so loud, it's difficult for me to use language to address it in any kind of cogent way.
I have not been successful at writing anything since October 7th. I've drafted things, but I think it comes from the fact that I look for poems in the language. I feel like the language has been around trying to match itself to human experience for thousands of years, and I've only been around for 74 of those. Sometimes I feel old as dirt, but not in comparison to. And I look for the poem in the language, like if I'm playing with the language or a phrase or some way to convey an image, what I'm going to end up doing to it in order to feed and water it and grow it is going to have everything to do with what's on my mind. And that's how I sneak up on myself and find out what I'm thinking and feeling, which is often, I guess, I don't know, I'm a little bit at one remove from that most of the time. Whether that's a good thing or not, it's just the way I'm wired. So that's my way to figure out, what's going on with Richard. And it's in the language there. So I just play, literally. I started painting as a hobby, a COVID hobby. And it taught me a lot, it reminded me a lot of things I had forgotten about not letting the will do the work of the imagination and letting accidents happen, and steering them, with the part of me that steers them then is the part of me that's reacting to the world right now. And that's how I find out what I'm really about right now.
Well, on that note, let's give our poets one more round of applause. Thank you both so much for being here, and thank you, our audience, for joining us tonight.